Welcome to Believe It or Not, an Interfaith Grand River program. I'm your host, August Edelman, and I'm joined today by Bishop Carla Blakley, who is the Bishop of the Eastern Synod of the Lutheran Church.
Correct.
Thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, thank you for the invitation. This is just exciting to be here.
Well, I'm really excited to talk to you and hear a little bit about your journey. We'd spoken to the previous bishop on the show, I think last summer.
Yeah.
So it's exciting to hear, somebody who's new taking the position and hear what your thoughts are, and also hear about your journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess I'll start with just asking you to tell me a bit about yourself.
Well, interestingly, 35 years ago, started here at Waterloo Lutheran, which is now Martin Luther University College, and I interned in this church here. So it's so funny to be back here. I graduated, was ordained here in the Eastern Synod, and my husband and I are actually from Saskatchewan.
Okay.
So we went back because all the grandparents were there. 2 of my children were born here when I was in graduate school. We went back, and I have been a pastor in Regina, Saskatchewan for 30 years.
Wow.
And then was asked to let my name stand for nomination and as bishop, and then I was nominated. So I'm back. So it's like a full circle.
Wow, that's so cool. So you've always been Lutheran then?
I was born Lutheran. I was born actually into a different Lutheran church. There's 2 Lutheran churches, several Lutheran churches in Canada, but the large one is the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, which I am part of. I was born into the LCC, Lutheran Church Canada, which is a much smaller, very conservative church. So I grew up in this church, and I love this church. My grandparents, who came from Denmark, were part of this church. My parents were charter members in this church. I love the church, and I really, really, really wanted to be a pastor. And one day I said to my pastor, I think I was 17 or 18, ready to go off to university, I would like to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me, and he sat back, and he just started to laugh.
Oh.
And he said, oh, Carla, we don't ordain women, silly girl. And I remember just thinking, what?
Yeah.
What? And I left church that day. So it was very hurtful.
Yeah.
And I remember when he said, you're a girl, and I remember thinking, well, thank you for affirming my gender, but what does that have to do with me wanting to be a pastor?
Yeah.
So it actually sent me off, because on the way out the door, he said, you could be a missionary. And I said, oh, I'm good enough for the people over there, and I'm not good enough for the people here. And he said, yep.
Oh my gosh.
So I went off to university doing I don't know what I'm doing here, but here I am.
Yeah.
And then the Canadian International Development Agency was looking for people to go to Indonesia. In the back of my mind, it was like, well, you could be a missionary. I thought I should probably go there. So I applied, got accepted. Here I was off to Indonesia, to a little island of Sumatra. I had left the church at this point, but before I left, the good church people said to me, be very careful about the Muslims. Like, really? And I thought, so God doesn't like women, and God doesn't like Muslims. Right. I don't like this God that I'm learning about. So off I went to the jungles of Sumatra in Desa Lima Manis for a year. And I fell in love with the Muslim people. Beautiful, peace-loving, beautiful people. And so then I was confused, like, why do people not like them when my experience of them is they're beautiful and their faith is beautiful when they talk about Allah, when they pray. So I came back after that year and went to talk to Dr. Roland Miller, who's probably one of the foremost experts in Canada on Islam, who is the Dean Luther College in Regina.
Oh.
Also part of my LCC church.
Oh my goodness.
So when I said, you have to explain this to me, I don't understand. He said, you need to do a degree in religious studies, major in Islam. So I did.
Wow. That's so cool. That's so cool. And I mean, one of the things we talk about at Interfaith Grand River so often is that, as you have these conversations with people, when you eat with them and, chat and go to their events and ask the awkward questions and get to know them, they become so much more real. They become your friends and your neighbors and your colleagues.
Absolutely.
Not just a sort of mysterious strange
And
other.
God becomes a much bigger person, not in this little box that we try to sometimes keep God confined in, right? Mm-hmm. So then I went off to, I went to Indonesia. I went to Denmark, to Copenhagen. They offered me a scholarship there to do some work in Copenhagen. I'm Danish. Right. My grandparents came from Denmark. So I went to Copenhagen. And then I remember thinking, I should go to church. So the family I lived with took me to the 14th century church in that village on a Thursday afternoon. We had to pay, 14 krona to go in and see the church. And I said, can I come here and worship on Sunday? And they were like, it'd be very strange, but yeah, we could drop you off. So I came on Sunday, and I was sitting in the pew. In walked a female pastor. I had never seen one. Never. I remember that, you remember those days in your life. I remember the day the pastor said, you can't be a pastor. And I remember that day thinking, that's a woman, and she's a pastor, unless I'm in an Anglican church, right? Unless I'm mixed up. Yeah. And so, I just sat there like, whoa. So after I said, you're a Lutheran pastor, and you're a woman. She goes, yeah, there's a church in Canada that has started ordaining women. I'm like, oh. So oddly, my parents had a falling out with the church back in Regina. And my dad phoned me and said, we tried not to get your membership transferred because you're an adult. At this point, I was 21, 22. You're an adult, but they transferred your membership. You're now a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Canada, which is like 3 blocks down the street from my old church.
Wow.
And so then I'm like, Dad, I'm going to be a pastor. I was in Denmark still. So I came home the following May when I finished my classes, went to my new church and said, I want to be a pastor. And they said, woo, you'll be our first and we'll pay for you.
Really?
So then I applied to both seminaries. We have 2 seminaries, one in Saskatoon, one out here in Waterloo. And for a whole bunch of reasons, I chose to come to this seminary. My husband's a teacher. We got married right in between there. We left the day after our wedding to drive out here. And he taught in Mississauga. I started seminary, and
here we are today. That's extraordinary. And how you could say fortuitous, you could say providential, sort of that all kind of happened. You're in Denmark learning, women can be pastors, and you get the call from
Well, for me, that was God going, you go, girl, clear the way for you.
Yeah.
And so it's been a tremendous joy the whole 30 years. And now to be back here, back in this church where I interned, is just, it makes me smile.
That's extraordinary.
And to be back serving these people. I remember so many of them. I know so many of them. And it's just a joy.
It's an amazing story. And like you just sort of radiate happiness talking about it. Like, people here talk about being called to the church or called to a priesthood and you radiate that. So tell me a little bit about, because I've sort of learned a bit about Lutheranism through being here frequently and talking with our producer, Jan. But tell me about sort of some of the principles, some of the ideas that you kind of hold close to your heart that kind of shape you.
Yeah. I would say 2 things I hold close. Having the experience of being rejected caused me to work very strongly for inclusion in the church. And especially I became quite an advocate for 2S LGBT folks. And inclusion, and so our baptismal theology, when we baptized infants, we say you are loved, you belong, you are forgiven, you're God's child, precious child. And we can't undo that sacrament. It's a sacrament in the Lutheran Church. So for me, working for inclusion, especially for people who have said, someone say to them, because of your gender, because of who you love, because how you identify yourself, you can't be part of our church. The hair on the back of my neck goes up because I remember that day. Yeah. And so I work very hard for inclusion in our church. I think love is bigger than we allow it to be. And we've been taught some things that were incorrect. And we have to deconstruct some of the ways we were educated as youth. So part of this whole thing is I was confused about it, is I went back and I did an MA in human sexuality.
Oh, interesting.
And I wrote a piece based on Genesis 1:26 to 29 on querying the image of God.
Interesting.
And looking at what the Hebrew text says, looking at how we've interpreted this, and came out even stronger that we need to love, and the children of Abraham need to stand together, and our 2S LGBT siblings, we need to stand together. And so it's been good work in the church. Inclusion is my thing, though.
That's amazing. I always love to hear that, and it's so I feel like it brings a kind of revival as well, I think, into religious institutions where maybe people have felt kind of pushed away, to go, you can come back. We are doing better. We are doing things differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So clearly, I mean, it sounds like your your religious identity has sort of shaped the course of your whole life. Tell me a bit about like the community you've built throughout all of this.
The community, I have always looked outside the church doors and welcomed people in. It's what I've always done. And so, as I said, I just moved back to Kitchener from Regina, but in Kitchener, in Regina, a very strong relationship with the multi-faith community. And as I said, Rabbi Jeremy was one of my best friends. We worked together. One of the fun things we did, I think it was about 7 or 8 years ago, with Zarqa Narwa, Islam, a Muslim, and Jeremy and I wanted to have our communities have a better experience together. So we wrote a game. And we invited everyone for supper. So I brought 40 people from my community. Zarqa brought 40 folks from the Muslim community, and Jeremy, we did it at the synagogue. And so we had a halal kosher meal together, which was super fun to explain to everyone how we did that and why we did that. And then we wrote this game that we put everyone in tables of 8, and we had Indigenous leaders there as well. So we wanted to have 2 Indigenous people, 2 Muslim, 2 Jews, and 2 Christians, which was super funny when people trying to organize themselves. I need a Jew over here, and I need another Muslim over here. So we finally got them all seated at their table, and we gave them half an hour to play this game where we had these questions. Tell us about the hijab. Mm-hmm. Tell us about this. Tell us about that. We couldn't get them to stop.
Yeah.
We couldn't get them to stop. They were so fascinated learning about each other and like, what is Advent in the Christian church? Why do you baptize baby? Like the questions and the conversation, we couldn't get people to stop. And I keep hearing that was such a highlight. And we keep saying we were going to do it again. And then the pandemic hit. And now I'm out here. So maybe I'll have to do it again here.
I'll connect you with my rabbi. That's such a great idea. And I mean, we get to do a little bit that at Interfaith Grand River because we go to different places of worship, and meet there. And I remember my first time here being like, "Can I open this? What is this?" And it was a baptismal thing, and I was like, "Do you dunk the baby? Like, how do you like?" I wasn't sure. I know. So there's so many cool things, and how many times people have come up to me and be like, "How do you keep your yarmulke on?" And I'm like, let me show you. Because people love talking about the things they're passionate about.
Absolutely. It's good to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great idea. And I would love to make that happen here. That would
be amazing. Let's do it.
Yeah. So you're saying sort of like being outside the doors, looking out and bringing people in. How has that affected you, having that community or building that community?
It just makes me understand God in a much bigger way. Mm-hmm. And I travel a lot, and anywhere I go, I really like to experience cultures. I like to experience it through the food, but experience cultures, experience different religions. I don't think there's a way. I think there's many ways to God. And the more you learn, the bigger your friendship pool gets, the bigger it gets, and the better understanding you have of each other, the more peace there is, the more love there is. And we need more love in this world, not hate. And that comes from understanding each other, not judging and then, trying to keep people away. I think we need to make our circles bigger. Mm-hmm. And in the Lutheran Church, we're very close with the Anglicans. We work well with other people, and we constantly need to keep learning about our neighbors, whoever they are in your neighborhood.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you mentioned being told no, being told that you didn't belong as a pastor. Has there been a time, and that obviously was a challenge. So I guess my question to you is there a time when, other than that your faith has been a challenge, or when maybe your faith has helped you overcome a challenge?
My faith has never been a challenge to me. My faith has remained really strong. I think sometimes I am challenged by institutional churches, mm-hmm. and when they choose to not be open to God being larger, and that God's love is unconditional. Yeah. We try to put conditions on God's love, and when we do that, I think we get into trouble. Yeah. So,
is there a time when it's helped you through a challenge?
Oh, absolutely. There's lots of times where this stance, why on earth would you want to meet with the rabbi? Mm-hmm. Because I believe the lovers of God need to stand together. The children of Abraham, mm-hmm. we're connected, right? And why wouldn't we want to get to know each other and build better relationships? And in a world where anti-Semitism is on the rise, I want to be able to go to my Jewish rabbi, my Jewish synagogue, my Jewish friends and say, are you okay? How can we help? which I hope we will do to each other, right? And we just have to build stronger relationships in the world, break down the barriers that are there, because love is big and love is strong and love wins.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. So I guess my last question for you is pretty open-ended. Is there something that you were sort of thinking, oh, I hope I get to talk about this today? There's something I always love to share, or I want to tell the people at home about this. Is there something you'd like to share?
You know, one of my biggest things around inclusion to all people and God's unconditional love is to say to people, I see you, I believe you, I will love you, and you just watch what happens when we do that. And I wish we would do more of that instead of, you know, I see you and I don't like what you're wearing, I don't like this, I don't like that, rather than unconditional love. Unconditional love is a great practice and it brings hope back into the world, and we need hope.
We really do.
Yeah.
Well, I have gained a lot of hope and inspiration from talking with you today. This has been so interesting. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you as well.
Yeah, awesome.
And thank you for joining us on Believe It or Not. We'll see you next time.